Welcome. In this video tutorial we're going to look at the multimedia platform called Flash. Currently Flash is an Adobe product and part of the Creative Suite, but because the lab that we're working with in this class has an older version of Flash, we're going to take a jump back almost 10 years and take a look at Macromedia Flash MX. Now I think this was released around 2003, 2004, and utilizes the programming language ActionScript 2. Flash Macromedia or Macromedia Flash MX has quite a bit of functionality and is the core of what we find with Flash today. But if you are going to look into developing further Flash games or Flash interactives, I do suggest that you get a more up-to-date version than MX. Once again, we're utilizing this more because of our lab situation. To start, we are now looking at the Flash interface. We'll start over here in the left-hand corner, and we have our toolbar, arrows and lassos and text tools, shape tools. We'll get into those. Across the top here we have a timeline, and we see a first layer, like many of the products that we've used, both in video editing and in image editing. We will be working with layers, and like in audio editing and video editing, we'll be working across time. This is the stage, the area that we'll be putting our visuals on and building from. Down here we have a couple of the properties menu and the actions menu, which will be writing some action script in there. And over here we have some other menus. The one menu that is not currently shown, but that I think is quite important, is the library. So we'll start by going to the window menu up here at the top, and we'll choose to show the library, and the library pops up here. Now I'm just going to drag the library over into this area, and we now have our library here. We'll be creating some symbols soon over in the library area. Now, one of the core concepts of Flash is to think about keyframes and frames. And if you look here at the top on the timeline, you see these numbers. Those are the numbers of frames that have gone by. You can see by this indicator that we're looking at a 12 frame per second rate. So if you start to estimate, your first 12 frames will take about a second to play across the timeline. Now in this first frame of this track, we have a keyframe, and that keyframe means that whatever we put on our stage will be held within this keyframe. We'll talk a little bit more about the difference between keyframes and frames as we move forward. But let's start by making our first element. We're going to create a symbol, and this symbol is going to be called a movie clip. So I'm going to go to the Insert menu and click New Symbol, and a menu comes up asking me what kind of symbol I would like to create. I have three options: movie clip, button, and graphic, and we'll talk more about these. In the first one, we're going to create a movie clip, and we're going to call this hydrogen. So movie clip hydrogen, and I click OK. Now when I do that, notice that I get a little icon for a movie clip. It says the kind over here, and it's called hydrogen. And notice that I have my scene 1, that's sort of my main timeline, and then this indicates that I'm actually in the hydrogen movie clip right here. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating a symbol, and then I'm going to drag that out onto my stage. First, let's make our symbol. The first thing I'm going to do is click on the oval tool, and I'm going to change, let's see, now I have a paint bucket tool, which is the fill color, and I have a stroke, which is sort of the outline color. And let's take a look at that. I have sort of a lighter blue for the fill on the inside of the circle, and a bit of a darker color on the stroke on the outside. got my oval selected, and I'm just going to click over here on this crosshair. I'm going to drag this out and sort of make a small circle about yay big. Now you can see, and I can zoom in a little more. If I zoom into a couple 100%, you can start to see that. I can zoom in just a tad more. I can see that blue line, the dark blue line, that's the stroke around the edge, and the lighter blue on the inside, which is the fill. I'm going to go back to 100%. And what I have is my little round dot here, and for the purposes of our game, this is going to be a hydrogen molecule. So notice that when I created this shape, this frame up here went from being empty to now it has a bit of gray in it, and that means that there's something in my frame. If I click on the frame, then it highlights everything that that is in that frame on that layer. Right now we have a single frame with our circle in it. For ease later in the game, we're also going to create another movie clip symbol called hydroxide, and I'm going to click on hydrogen right here. I'm going to right click on it and say duplicate, and let's leave movie clip selected and call this hydroxide, and I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to leave hydroxide alone right now, but notice how I was able to take one symbol and just make a duplicate of it. I'm going to go back into my hydrogen, double click on that. I know it's selected. I see scene 1, hydrogen. And the next thing we're going to do is go back into our scene 1. So I click scene 1, and here's our stage. I'm going to grab my hydrogen symbol and pull this onto the stage, and look what happens in layer 1, frame 1. It's now white, and when I drop this, now it's black. I've set this right here. So what I'm going to do to this layer is double click on it, and hydrogen. And if I click on this, it selects my symbol. Now I'm going to bring this almost all the way up to the corner. Note that I can drag on it. You know that it's a symbol because it's got this blue outline on it. And the reason that we make shapes and images symbols is because then we can do stuff with them. In particular, what we're going to do is we're going to put some animation on this hydrogen symbol. Before we do that, I'm going to make sure that it's clicked, and down here in the properties menu, note that it highlights, it says that there's this movie clip, it's selected, and in this instance name here, I'm going to also name this hydrogen. Now it's important to put that name there. We're going to be, that's the name of this particular symbol on this particular frame. When we apply some scripting to it to make it do some stuff, it's going to be using this name, so it's important to put a name right here and associate this instance of the movie clip. So the next step is if I double click on this, it'll take me into the timeline for this movie clip. So double click. It's important to say, okay, I'm in scene 1, and now I'm in my movie clip here. This is the one that is on my stage. And now we're going to work a little bit with frames and keyframes. Here's frame 1, and that shows where my my symbol is right now. If I take a look down here, I can see the y and the x value. I'm going to change this to 3 and 3. And by doing that, I know where it is to start, and that'll help me when I finish knowing exactly where it is. Now in my timeline, I'm going to go over here, and I am going to insert a frame. insert frame. And now what I have are 20 frames of the same thing. For all 20 frames, this symbol, and 20 frames, if we remember, it's 12 frames per second, so we're looking at almost 2 seconds there in time. For all 20 frames, this symbol just sits right here in the corner. Now I have a dot right here, and that means it's a keyframe. And all of these other frames do not have dots. That means that all of these frames are going to mimic what's in this black dot here. Now I'm going to go click on frame 20, and I'm going to insert a keyframe. Click Insert Keyframe. And I'm going to grab a hold of my symbol, and I'm going to pull it right down here to the corner. And let's take a look at what happens in the timeline now. I've got for 19 frames, my symbol's right here, and on the 20th frame, it jumps down to the corner. Now I'm going to go to frame number 40, and instead of having to insert a frame and then inserting a keyframe, this time I'm just going to insert another keyframe. Insert a keyframe. And on this 40th keyframe, I'm going to grab my symbol and pull it right up to here. And if you look, for the first set of frames, it's over here in the left top corner. Second set of frames, it's down there in the lower left. Over here on 40, it jumps up to the top right. I'm going to do the same thing again and go down to Insert Keyframe on 60, and now I'm going to pull down to the bottom right. And for frame number 80, I'm going to insert a keyframe. And I'm going to drag it back up to where we started from. Now with my symbol highlighted, the easiest way to get to the exact point from where I started from, if you remember, I put in an x and y value of 3. So I'm just going to do that again. Down here in the lower left. 3 and 3. And now this should be synced up to where I started from. So if I click across these frames, I can see the general movement of what I'm calling the hydrogen molecule across the timeline. Now you can press enter and you can see the timeline move, and I get this jump. So once again, I place my playhead on the frame I want to start, and I click the time, I click enter, and it plays my timeline.